to another peaceful journey through time, dear friend. Before we begin this evening's exploration into the remarkable world of Viking shipbuilding, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us continue these gentle historical voyages, and it tells me you find comfort in our wanderings through the corridors of the past. Now settle in as we drift back through the mists of time to witness one of humanity's greatest maritime achievements. Tonight I invite you to imagine standing on the windswept shores of medieval Scandinavia, around the year 900. The salt air carries the rhythmic sound of axes against timber, the scraping of tools shaping wood, and the voices of master craftsmen calling across bustling shipyards. This is where legends were born not through myth, but through the calloused hands of shipbuilders, who understood that survival itself depended on their ability to conquer the unforgiving northern seas. Close your eyes and envision these magnificent vessels that would carry Norse warriors, traders, and explorers to distant shores from England to North America, centuries before Columbus would make his famous voyage. Viking ships were revolutionary pieces of technology that enabled a relatively small population, scattered across harsh Scandinavian landscapes, to become one of history's most influential maritime civilizations. The foundation of every Viking ship was the Clinker construction technique, also known as lapstrake building. This revolutionary method involved overlapping thin wooden planks along their edges and securing them together with iron rivets, creating a hull that was both incredibly strong and remarkably flexible. Picture craftsmen working from the outside in, building the shell of the ship first, and then adding internal frames for support. This technique was far more than just construction. It was an engineering philosophy that reflected the Vikings' deep understanding of how their ships would need to perform in the notoriously rough waters of the North Atlantic. The overlapping planks created natural strength through their stepped configuration, allowing the hull to flex with the waves rather than fighting against them. This flexibility was crucial for survival in violent storms that could arise suddenly in Nordic waters, where a rigid hull might crack under immense pressure. The choice of materials was equally critical to success. Oak reigned supreme as the preferred timber, prized for its incredible strength, natural resistance to rot, and ability to withstand the corrosive effects of salt water. When the finest oak wasn't available, builders would substitute with pine, maple, or birch, but oak remained the gold standard for the most important vessels. The Vikings were so particular about their timber that they would select trees based not just on species but on specific grain patterns that would provide maximum strength and flexibility when shaped into planks. The process of converting mighty oaks into ship planks was a testament to Viking craftsmanship. Rather than sawing the timber, which would cut across the natural grain and weaken the wood, Viking shipbuilders used axes and wedges to split planks along the grain. This technique required enormous skill and experience, as builders had to read the wood's natural structure and work with it rather than against it. The result was planks that were not only stronger, but also more flexible, capable of bending to follow complex curves of a ship's hull without breaking. The tools used in Viking shipbuilding were surprisingly simple, yet incredibly effective. The most important tool in any shipbuilder's arsenal was the axe, and not just one axe, but typically two different weights. A heavier shaping axe weighing around 2 kilograms was used for initial rough work of converting tree trunks into usable timber. A lighter trimming axe, weighing about 1 kilogram, handled the finer work of shaping and fitting individual pieces. The skill required to use these axes effectively was extraordinary. Master craftsmen could shape complex curves and achieve precise fits using nothing more than these hand tools. Other essential tools included adzes for hollowing and shaping, bow drills with spoon bits for creating rivet holes, and various hammers for setting the iron rivets that held planks together. Each tool served a specific purpose in the construction process, and the quality of the finished vessel depended heavily on the craftsman's mastery of these implements. The heart of every Viking ship was its keel, the long backbone that ran the length of the vessel and provided both structural integrity and directional stability. Made from a single piece of oak, the keel was carefully shaped using axes and other hand tools to create the precise profile needed for the ship's intended use. Connected to the keel were the stems, the curved pieces at bow and stern that gave Viking ships their distinctive profile. These stems were carved from single pieces of timber and featured characteristic steps that allowed overlapping planks to merge seamlessly into the ship's ends. The construction process began with laying the keel on specially built stocks, wooden supports that held the ship at correct height and angle for construction. The stems were then attached to the keel using carefully crafted scarf joints, sealed with tarred wool and secured with iron rivets and wooden tree nails. Once this backbone was in place, the real artistry of shipbuilding could begin. Planking a Viking ship was perhaps the most challenging aspect of the entire construction process. Each plank had to be individually shaped to follow compound curves of the hull, tapering from thick to thin along its length and curving both horizontally and vertically to match the ship's design. The shipbuilders used thin wooden strips called ribbons as guides, temporarily attached to help establish proper shape. Working from bottom up, they would fit each plank in turn, carefully shaping it to overlap perfectly with its neighbors. The riveting process was equally demanding, requiring two craftsmen working in perfect coordination. One man would hold a heavy hammer against the head of the rivet from outside the hull, while his partner cut the rivet to correct length from inside, fitted a small metal washer called a rove, and then hammered the protruding end flat to create a permanent joint. This process was repeated hundreds of times for each ship, with some vessels requiring thousands of individual rivets. Between the overlapping planks, builders packed tarred animal hair or wool to create a watertight seal. This caulking material was crucial for keeping the ocean out, and the entire hull was then coated with pine tar to provide additional waterproofing and protection against marine borers. The amount of tar required was substantial. Estimates suggest that a single longship needed over 130 gallons of pine tar for proper waterproofing. Archaeological evidence suggests that Vikings developed industrial-scale tar production specifically to meet demands of their shipbuilding industry. Large tar kilns discovered in eastern Sweden and dating to the Viking Age could produce up to 300 liters of tar per production cycle, 10 times more than smaller household kilns. This industrial capacity indicates just how important shipbuilding had become to Viking society and economy. The construction of internal frames and fittings required its own specialized knowledge. Unlike modern ships where the frame is built first, Viking ships had their frames fitted after planking was complete. These frames had to be carefully shaped to match the curve of the hull, and were attached using a combination of iron rivets and wooden tree nails. The frames provided crucial structural support while still allowing the hull to flex in heavy seas. Oar holes were precisely positioned along the ship's sides, typically spaced about 850 millimeters apart, to provide proper leverage for the rowers. The spacing was critical. Too close, and the oarsmen would interfere with each other. Too far apart, and they couldn't effectively coordinate their strokes. Many longships featured removable sections of planking at the oar holes, allowing the openings to be sealed when sailing rather than rowing. The famous dragon heads that adorned many Viking warships served both practical and spiritual purposes. These elaborate carvings were typically detachable, allowing them to be removed when approaching friendly shores or added when sailing into battle. According to Icelandic law, dragon heads had to be removed when approaching Iceland to avoid frightening the protective land spirits. This demonstrates how deeply Vikings believed in the spiritual power of their ship decorations. The mast and rigging of a Viking ship represented another remarkable achievement in maritime engineering. The single square sail, often made from wool and treated with tar for waterproofing, could propel these vessels at remarkable speeds when conditions were favorable. The mast was typically made from pine, chosen for its combination of strength and flexibility. When not needed, the mast could be lowered and stowed along the ship's centerline, reducing wind resistance and allowing the crew to row more effectively. The steering system of Viking ships was equally ingenious. Rather than a central rudder, these vessels used a large steering oar mounted on the starboard side near the stern. This side-mounted rudder could be quickly lifted out of the water when beaching the ship, and its design provided surprisingly precise control, even in rough seas. The term starboard itself comes from this arrangement, starboard in Old Norse, meaning the steering side of the ship. Viking shipbuilding represented a massive investment of time, labor, and resources that could only be undertaken by wealthy communities or powerful leaders. Modern estimates suggest that building a 30-meter longship required approximately 40,000 hours of skilled labor, equivalent to 100 craftsmen working full-time for a year. The labor was carefully organized, with different specialists responsible for various aspects of construction. A master shipbuilder supervised the entire project and needed approximately 500 hours of work, while specialized craftsmen handled specific tasks. Stemsmiths required 1,000 hours, boat builders 10,000 hours, woodsmen and assistants 14,000 hours, and workers fitting rivets 1,000 hours. Woodsmen and their assistants were responsible for selecting, felling, and preparing timber, while other workers produced countless iron rivets needed for construction. The performance characteristics of Viking ships were truly extraordinary. These vessels could achieve speeds of 10 to 12 knots under favorable sailing conditions, remarkably fast for their time. Under road power alone, Viking ships could maintain speeds of 4 to 6 knots, enabling them to cover large distances quickly. This speed was crucial in raids and surprise attacks on coastal settlements. The shallow draft of Viking ships was another key advantage, allowing them to navigate in waters only 1 meter deep. With such shallow draft, Viking longships could sail along coastlines, estuaries, and even inland waterways, facilitating raids and trade deep into Europe. This flexibility gave Vikings a strategic advantage, as they could strike unexpectedly and retreat before enemies had chance to mount defense. The versatility of Viking ship design was remarkable. These vessels could serve multiple purposes, from swift warships to spacious trading vessels. The Drekar or dragon-headed longships were stealthy troop carriers that could cross open oceans under sail and then switch to oars for lightning fast hit and run attacks. The Nar or ocean-going cargo vessel facilitated trade networks and colonization of Iceland, Greenland, and America. Archaeological discoveries continue to reveal new insights into Viking Age shipbuilding. The recent discovery of a complete Viking Age shipyard at Birka in Sweden provides unprecedented evidence of how these construction projects were organized. The site includes stone-lined depressions that served as building slips, along with thousands of unused and used boat rivets, whetstones, and woodworking tools. This archaeological evidence confirms that Viking shipbuilding was conducted on an industrial scale, with specialized facilities dedicated to construction and repair. The social organization of Viking shipbuilding was equally sophisticated. Building a longship was a community effort that brought together diverse specialists from across Scandinavian society. Master craftsmen passed their knowledge down through generations of apprentices, creating a continuous tradition of excellence that lasted for centuries. The investment required for a single ship was so substantial that it typically required the resources of an entire community or wealthy chieftain. The legacy of Viking shipbuilding extends far beyond the medieval period. The Clinker construction technique developed by Norse craftsmen influenced European shipbuilding for centuries, and versions of this method are still used in boat building today. The emphasis on flexibility, speed, and shallow draft pioneered by Viking shipbuilders became fundamental principles of naval architecture that continue to influence modern vessel design. The environmental impact of Viking shipbuilding was also significant. The massive demand for oak timber led to systematic forest management practices that shaped Scandinavian landscapes. The industrial-scale production of tar required vast quantities of pine wood, leading to the development of specialized forestry techniques. These activities created economic networks that extended far beyond individual shipyards, connecting communities across Scandinavia in a web of resource extraction and craft production. The decline of traditional Viking shipbuilding came gradually as maritime technology evolved. The introduction of larger sailing ships with multiple masts and more sophisticated rigging systems eventually made the single-sailed longship obsolete for long-distance voyaging. However, the fundamental principles of Norse ship design strength through flexibility, shallow draft capability, and efficient construction techniques continued to influence shipbuilding traditions throughout Northern Europe. The transformation of Viking shipbuilding from local craft tradition to industrial-scale production represents one of the most remarkable technological achievements of medieval Europe. Through centuries of innovation and refinement, Norse craftsmen created vessels that enabled their people to become a dominant maritime force. Their ships carried Vikings to the far corners of the known world and beyond, facilitating trade, exploration, and conquest on an unprecedented scale. The story of Viking shipbuilding reminds us that technological advancement often comes from the combination of practical necessity, available resources, and human ingenuity. The harsh environment of medieval Scandinavia demanded maritime solutions, while abundant forests provided the raw materials. Most importantly, generations of skilled craftsmen applied their creativity and expertise to develop construction techniques that represented the pinnacle of medieval naval architecture. As you drift towards sleep tonight, remember these master shipbuilders who transformed simple trees into vessels capable of conquering the most challenging waters on Earth. Their dedication to excellence and innovation created ships that were not merely transportation, but works of art that embodied the spirit and ambitions of the Viking Age. The thunder of their construction has long since faded from Scandinavian fjords, but their legacy endures in every person who chooses craftsmanship over convenience and quality over quantity. Thank you for joining me on this gentle voyage through the world of Viking shipbuilding. If you found peace in this exploration of how Norse craftsmen created their maritime masterpieces, please like this video and subscribe for more historical bedtime stories. Sleep well, and may your rest be as sturdy and dependable as the mighty oak ships that carried Vikings across unknown seas toward distant horizons.